Part 1. The Big Hook, the Arrogance and the Storm. Look closely at the image of the two warriors. On one side, you have a heavily armored European knight. He sits atop a massive warhorse, trapped in a dark, muddy, and freezing forest. He is slow, exhausted, and looking around in absolute confusion and terror. On the other side, you have a fierce Mongol horse archer. He is riding effortlessly at breakneck speed across the open plains. Surrounded by a blinding storm of fire and dust, he draws back a deadly compound bow with lethal precision. This is not just a battle between two different types of soldiers. It is a terrifying, apocalyptic collision of two entirely different worlds. In the early 13th century, European kings and knights believed they were the invincible center of the universe. They trusted their massive stone castles, their deep forests, and their impenetrable iron armor to protect them from any outside threat. But their incredible arrogance was about to be shattered. An unknown, unstoppable storm was brewing in the east. A phantom army of nomads would emerge from the fog, crush the absolute greatest military forces of Western civilization in a matter of days, and burn their proudest cities to ash. In this documentary, we are going to uncover the terrifying history of the Mongol invasion of Europe. You will witness the brilliant, ruthless tactics that paralyzed the European knights, the apocalyptic devastation of the Hungarian plains, and the absolute panic that consumed the Pope in Rome. But most incredibly, you will discover the hidden truth of how Europe actually survived. Because the salvation of Western civilization did not come from military genius or the thick walls of a stone castle. It came from a single, sudden death 4,000 miles away. Part 2. A blind and divided Europe. The warning ignored. To understand how Europe was almost completely wiped off the map, we must first look at the disastrous state of the continent in the years leading up to the invasion. Europe was completely blind to the approaching storm. The continent was deeply divided, entirely consumed by its own internal political drama and religious conflicts. At the very moment they needed to unite, the two most powerful figures in Western Europe, Pope Gregory IX and the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, were locked in a bitter, endless struggle for ultimate supremacy. They were literally calling each other the Antichrist. While the Emperor and the Pope fought in Italy, the kings of France and England were constantly squabbling over territory. Meanwhile, thousands of the best knights and military resources were being drained away, sent on ships to fight in the distant crusades in the Middle East. Europe was fractured, distracted, and looking entirely in the wrong direction. Because of this, they completely ignored the dark whispers coming from the east. Slowly, faint and terrifying rumors began to reach the royal courts of Poland, Germany, and Hungary. Traveling merchants, exhausted spies, and desperate refugees spoke of a new, terrifying empire rising from the steppes. They described a horde of demonic horsemen who moved faster than the wind, warriors who drank the blood of their own horses to survive long journeys, who erased entire ancient cities from existence, and who slaughtered millions without a shred of mercy. But the arrogant European lords simply laughed in their grand dining halls. They dismissed these warnings as wild exaggerations and peasant ghost stories. To the medieval European mind, no primitive tribe of uneducated nomads could ever pose a real threat to civilized Christendom. They firmly believed that their heavy cavalry was the ultimate weapon of war. They thought that even if these barbarians did arrive, they would never be able to navigate the dense, muddy forests, cross the wide, freezing rivers, or breach the towering stone fortresses of Europe. This profound geographical and technological arrogance created a fatal, false sense of security. The European leaders did not build alliances. They did not reinforce their eastern borders. They simply waited. And while they waited, the greatest military genius of the 13th century, was busy drawing up a master plan to burn their kingdoms to the ground. Part 3. The Ultimate War Machine. When the Mongols finally arrived, Europe faced an ultimate war machine unlike anything in human history. The European way of war was incredibly slow and rigid. A knight relied on the sheer brute force of a heavy cavalry charge, weighed down by heavy mail and early plate armor. The Mongols, however, rewrote the rules of war entirely. They did not have slow, vulnerable supply wagons. Instead, the entire Mongol force moved as a highly efficient, self-contained unit. Every single warrior rode with multiple spare horses, allowing them to travel at lightning speeds without ever stopping to rest. Their primary weapon was the Mongolian composite bow. It was lighter, faster, and far more precise than European weapons, striking with devastating force. Instead of engaging in brutal, close-quarter combat, their highly mobile horse archers would continuously harass the heavily armored knights from a distance, exhausting them and bleeding them dry. But their true power was intelligence. The Mongols operated a vast, highly advanced communication network known as the YAM system. This system used a network of relay stations equipped with fresh horses and supplies, allowing military messengers to travel at incredible speeds. As a result, Mongol commanders stayed perfectly informed of battlefield developments across vast distances. They moved not like a chaotic mob, but like a highly disciplined, interconnected pack of wolves hunting their prey. Part 4. The Fall of the Rus. The terror began just outside the borders of Western Europe. Before striking the heart of the continent, the Mongol war machine swept brutally through the principalities of Kiev and Rus. The scattered Russian princes tried to resist, but they were systematically annihilated. In the year 1240, after a relentless campaign, the great and ancient city of Kiev was captured and devastated. Following this destruction, the Rus principalities were violently forced to become vassals of the rapidly expanding Mongol Empire. Survivors and desperate refugees fled westward in absolute terror. They crossed the borders, bringing horrific warnings to the kings of Europe. They described a horde of invincible horsemen who erased entire ancient cities from existence. But the arrogant European lords simply laughed in their grand dining halls. They dismissed these warnings as wild exaggerations and peasant ghost stories. To the medieval European mind, no primitive tribe of nomads could ever pose a real threat to civilized Christendom. They firmly believed that their heavy cavalry and fortified stone castles were the ultimate defense. This profound geographical and technological arrogance created a fatal, false sense of security. The European leaders did not build alliances. They did not reinforce their eastern borders. And while they waited, the Eastern Storm finally broke upon them. Part 5. The Brilliant Two-Pronged Attack. The invasion of Europe was masterminded by General Subutai, arguably the greatest military strategist of the 13th century, and commanded by Batu Khan. Subutai knew that if the various European kingdoms managed to unite their heavy cavalry and form a massive coalition, they could present a formidable obstacle. Therefore, he designed a brilliant, multi-pronged invasion plan to create absolute geographical chaos. Instead of marching as one massive, predictable target, the Mongols divided their forces. A diversionary force of around 20,000 riders, commanded by Princes Kadan and Baidar, was sent north into Poland. Their primary mission was not total conquest, but to cause enough destruction to prevent the northern European armies from marching south to assist their allies. Meanwhile, the main Mongol force, led by Batu and Subutai, swept directly toward the Kingdom of Hungary. This coordinated two-pronged attack completely paralyzed the European response. The kings and dukes of Christendom were entirely confused, facing a highly mobile enemy that seemed to strike everywhere at once. The European leaders could not unite, and they could not predict where the next storm of arrows would fall. The stage was perfectly set for a bloodbath. Part 6. The Slaughter of Knights. In April 1241, the true nightmare descended upon Europe. In Poland, a combined European army led by Duke Henry the Pious gathered to halt the northern Mongol diversion. This force included heavily armored troops, Polish nobility, and elite Christian warriors from the Knights Templar and Teutonic orders. On April 9th, they clashed at the Battle of Legnica. This is exactly where the terrifying contrast between the two military worlds became a deadly reality. The European knights, clad in heavy armor and relying on slow, brute force charges, were completely outmaneuvered by the swift Mongol horse archers. The Mongols employed their signature, devastating tactic, the feigned flight. They pretended to retreat in panic, tricking the proud European knights into breaking their tight formations and chasing them across the battlefield. Once the knights were exhausted, scattered, and bogged down, the Mongols suddenly wheeled their horses around. They unleashed a torrential rain of armor-piercing arrows, slaughtering the Christian forces almost to the last man. Just 2 days later, on April 11th, the absolute darkest hour arrived. Over 400 miles to the south, the main Hungarian army under King Bela IV was encamped at the Sajo River. In the brutal Battle of Mohi, Subutai and Batu Khan executed a masterclass of encirclement. They trapped the Hungarians inside their own heavily guarded camp, pounding them with relentless catapult and arrow fire. When the panicked Hungarians attempted to flee through a deliberate gap left by the Mongols, they were hunted down and massacred for miles. In exactly 48 hours, the two greatest military forces in Central Europe had been completely wiped off the map. The unbreakable European knights were broken. Part 7. The Devastation of Hungary. With the royal armies completely destroyed at the Sajo River, the Kingdom of Hungary was left entirely defenseless. The Mongols spread out across the plains, initiating a campaign of utter devastation, where cities like Pest were taken and burned to the ground, and crops and livestock were systematically confiscated. King Bela IV was forced to flee for his life, running all the way to the Dalmatian coast in Croatia. The human cost was apocalyptic. Historical estimates suggest that between 15% and 50% of the entire Hungarian population perished due to warfare, massacres, famine, and disease. In the Great Plain region alone, the population loss was estimated to be over 50%. The devastation was so absolute that the Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick II, later wrote that the entire precious Kingdom of Hungary was depopulated, devastated, and turned into a barren wasteland. Part 8. The Pope's Panic. As the Mongols ravaged Eastern Europe, absolute panic consumed Western Christendom. But at the exact moment they needed to unite against this existential threat, the two most powerful figures in Western Europe, Pope Gregory IX and Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, were locked in a bitter, endless struggle for power. Instead of organizing a defense, the Pope and the Emperor were firmly painted into their corners, hurling the wildest accusations at each other. Pope Gregory IX even denounced Emperor Frederick as a heretic, a monster of the sea, and the Antichrist himself. However, as the Mongol forces crossed into the March of Moravia and laid waste to the countryside, the horrifying reality finally set in. Many people feared that Italy and the dominions of the Pope might be the next targets. In a desperate, last-minute response, Pope Gregory IX ordered the preaching of a crusade against the Mongols, and Emperor Frederick II issued an encyclical to organize a military defense. Europe was quite literally on the brink of absolute extinction, waiting for a blow that seemed impossible to survive. Part 9. The Unexpected Salvation. But just as the heart of Western Europe was about to be torn out, the unthinkable happened. In the spring of 1242, the Mongol armies suddenly stopped their relentless advance. They packed up their massive camps, turned their horses around, and began to withdraw eastward, disappearing back into the mist. Europeans were completely stunned, falling to their knees to thank God for a miraculous deliverance. But it was not a miracle. It was a matter of strict political law. 4,000 miles away, the supreme leader of the Mongol Empire, Ogedei Khan, had died on December 11th, 1241. According to ancient Mongol custom, whenever a great Khan died, major military campaigns had to be halted. All royal princes, including the brilliant commander Batu Khan and his general Subutai, were required to return to the capital of Karakorum in Mongolia to participate in the election of a new leader. Because of one man's death on the other side of the planet, the greatest military threat in European history simply packed up and went home. The apocalypse was canceled by a political technicality. Part 10. The Legacy. Europe survived the Eastern Storm, but the continent was forever changed. The devastating invasion served as a brutal, unforgettable wake-up call. The surviving leaders, such as King Bela IV of Hungary, realized that their traditional wooden defenses were completely useless against advanced siege tactics. As a direct result, Europe began a massive, urgent campaign to construct the giant, impenetrable stone castles and fortresses that we still see standing today. But the Mongol invasion did something even more profound. It shattered Europe's isolated worldview. The vast empire forged by the Mongols eventually established a period of stability known as the Pax Mongolica, which secured communication and trade routes stretching all the way to China. This unprecedented connection inspired brave European explorers to travel eastward, sparking a massive exchange of goods, technologies, and ideas between East and West. The collision between the heavy, muddy iron of the European knight and the fiery, lightning-fast speed of the Mongol archer brought death to millions. But by doing so, it violently forced a divided continent to wake up, adapt, and lay the foundations for the modern, globalized world. If you loved this deep dive into one of history's greatest turning points, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We will see you in the next chapter.